Another draft physics video presentation. Comments, and then I was going to play a science video and comment on it, but instead we'll probably do some Pyrrho, who's made some sort of rag, no doubt, where there'll be zero content, lots of undefended accusations, and just garbage. Just typical human crap as an argument. There's just nothing good to say. People suck, and they suck at arguing, and they suck at any effort to be, say, intellectually honest, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, seriously, Wheeler will not debate anyone. It's true enough, and I've never seen him back up any of his word salad with experimental evidence. Well, he does some experiments, but they're not controlled experiments, so they're really bad experiments, like where he puts his finger on the scales and does, just horrible experiments. So yeah, they're just more crap to fool people. You do it right if you've got a good argument. You do it wrong if you want to fudge the truth, kind of thing. I know it's depressing, but you must continue to debunk Clown Wheeler. Flat Earthers get scores of followers as well. Yes, it just sucks. This planet sucks. Clearly. So James SS, who's more whatever this is, this bullshit talk. Hey, I'm sorry that you interpreted my previous question to be rude in some way. Like you can't figure out why I consider it rude. I've spent 7 years making a distinction between forces and matter, and I've cut it all the way down to just two kinds of force, plus or minus, two kinds of matter, electron, proton, and two kinds of interactions. So I've reduced it to something that just can't anymore be screwed up. I mean, you can't just have a conversation with me and be confused somehow between what a force thing is, going the speed of light. All right, it doesn't have that is always the same. They're indivisible. They're elemental things. So they're very unconfusing in the sense they always do the same thing. They travel in a straight line at the speed of light until they hit an electron. I mean, I've made it so clear. And you're pretending they're all just vague, undefined things by throwing them all in some category and saying they're particles. Well, I've sort of made the point that I don't care what the force is, whether it's a particle or not, whatever you want to call it, it's a clump, of energy, of momentum. And that's what quantum means. So at least in that respect, physics got it right, and they figured out there's this Planckness, this idea of the smallest of the small, and there's really nothing smaller, and it's the smallest amount of something. And you can't make a smaller spoon for pouring stuff into the batter or the mix, however you want to put it. I mean, I made this all clear, and to pretend that somehow it's ambiguous, that all I've given you is a bunch of ambiguous mush. Bull fucking shit, cunt. So don't tell me I have some obligation to interpret your complete bizarre misparaphrase of the physics I've provided, and it is a misparaphrase. I mean, again, I have made it so fucking clear that fuck you. Yeah, just fuck you and that bullshit. All right, it was an honest question. I wasn't commenting on the question. I was commenting on the premise of the question, which was nonsense and mush. I was curious about your answer at the time. I don't really care. I mean, clearly you're not on the subject. I mean, clearly these videos are not talking about the cosmos, because it's big, fat, ugly, boring piece of shit, the cosmos. It's full of big, clumpy stuff doing basically rudimentary behaviors, banging into each other, that kind of thing. It's so simple that there's no point in talking about it, in my opinion, in any elaborate way. The basic mechanisms are decided in the small universe, as I've said over and over again. That's where the laws are. That's the interesting part. I'll be back shortly. Should be back. It looked a little stuttery there. Anyway, hopefully things will be okay. I feel that you overreacted somewhat. Yes, if there was your comment and no context at all. But we know there's a context on this channel of constant shit accusations, constant misparaphrases of what I say. I'm being called a science denier, yet no one can point to the experiment I'm denying except ones that never took place, like the detection experiments, for example, and the double slit. So this is just all bullshit, to claim I'm supposed to sit there and react to your comments as if there isn't any context on this channel. So you're just pretending there's no context here. And the context is that, I say something simple. There's forces and there's matter. And people start writing Twan poetry or some other kind of crap, So what do you want me, how do you want me to react? You're just behaving just like them. So why should I treat you just like them? I know that you won't care about that. Again, first off, yes, I have an agenda here. Sorry, but yes, that's right. It's called a rational conversation I'd like to have. And rational conversations can't constantly have their goalposts changed by idiotic premises that imply that I've left something unstated or I haven't been overtly very specific about what I claim to exist. Unlike conventional physics, I'm not giving you vague virtual photony answers. I'm not saying it's kind of like or it seems like. So again, fuck you. But I just wanted to mention it as you called me a shithead. Take care. Yeah, well, fuck you. Is that plain enough? I mean, if you can't take this seriously, and you obviously can't if you don't understand the distinction I've made between forces and matter, then clearly you don't belong here. You're not doing this for any sincere effort. You're not hanging around for any sincere reason if you haven't picked up on the fact that I've been explicitly clear about making distinctions between what forces do, what the elements of atoms do, what atoms do, what multicellular organisms do. I mean, I've made clear distinctions. So, yeah, fuck you. Same old bullshit. Again, just please quote me somewhere, you assholes, when you're going to sit there and pretend I've left something confused. Again, it's froze a little bit. It's not a good sign. Anyway, so off to the Pyrrho video. See how, did it again. Anyway, we'll just assume it's okay. So I haven't listened to this part. Stopped right here where he gets onto this. So he titles the video Science Denial, and for 14 minutes he doesn't talk about anything scientific at all. He just does politics and other bullshit. That's because he loves us.
Just point it for me. Because I was
okay, I better pick up the volume. I have it sped up a bit, so maybe I'll slow it down a tiny bit. And back it up a hair. I was proud, he said. It's funny.
Boondock Main time. This is one of my better episodes. Okay. Boom. Science. Science.
Alright, like he would even know what the word, like, it's supposed to mean something. Like, science means what? Douchebags with glasses who are going to tell us what reality is? Is that what science is? Because it doesn't seem like it has any of this obligation to defend what they say. So just like religious kooks, they just say it and keep saying it and keep saying, it's the most proven theory of the history of mankind. Blah, blah, blah. They just say this shit. They don't demonstrate this shit.
What is the deal with all the denial of science? You got...
The deal is that it sounds quite incredible and in a sense just preposterous sometimes, and the evidence you have for the things you claim to be real is tiny, is very hard to see, and so there should be denial.
You're Gary. This is a huge disappointment for me, because I was proud of myself to not judge Gary just on...
So let's understand. The first video he made was just complete bullshit. You know, oh, you cannot possibly say we're wrong. You can't say it. You're not allowed to. All right, and you're automatically an idiot, an imbecile. He didn't pay any attention to the arguments I made, and then when he tried to make arguments, you know, defending the single slit experiment, for example, he couldn't draw it right. He couldn't explain it right. I mean, none of the details are correct. So if we go back and find those old videos, they're laughable in terms of how wrong they were. Now, not that I had the same knowledge base I have now. I mean, now it would be so easy to critique all of the mistakes because, frankly, I have a lot of knowledge on the subject now. But even back then, I could do it.
Superficial means, and not just to like virtue signal. I mean, I honestly think, hey, you've got an anxiety problem or this or that.
I don't know what that has to do with any of this, but
continuing. You're a hermit. I value your opinion.
Whatever. Yes, and I've never valued yours. Okay, it's just merely a representation of a wrong opinion. So at least you were a rational debater in some sense in the past, because mostly in the philosophy area you knew you couldn't prove anything you were saying, so you knew you had to defend it with some sort of reasoning. And you're still in the same position, essentially, in science. You're just defending things for which there's not a big substantial wall of evidence that you claim somebody can't deny. There's nothing undeniable about wave theory. There's nothing undeniable about any of it. The fact that photons are twice as affected by gravity, you think that the evidence isn't undeniable? It's grotesquely insufficient for the assertion.
So it was a big disappointment when he went all...
That's right, he started looking at the evidence and saying something simple like bent space is a silly answer. Bent geodesic, whatever that means, it's just a silly answer. Okay, there's a force that causes gravity. Just like all the other stuff that moves, there's a force doing it. Magnets aren't going towards each other or repelling because of some bent geodesic. It's just crap as an answer. There's a force. Something's affecting them. There's a cause and an effect. And there's no cause and effect reasonableness about some idea that because there's an atom that contains an electron and a proton that somehow the electron and the proton are bending some sort of geodesic. It doesn't make any sense.
Science nut job, right? And I don't mind people having their own scientific theory.
So again, there's be no evidence of why I am wrong or what I've theorized being wrong. Like when I explained to you that in the radar example, for example, of the two-slit experiment, the geometry for jamming, that is just screwing up the frequency of the signal, no interference required, is exactly the same geometry as wave interference. There's no way mathematically to demonstrate one or the other. You have to do it through some other mechanism. Now, that's dumbass? That's crazy talk to sit there and just bring up the fact that there's no way to tell, okay, which one caused the effect through some sort of mathematical means.
I have my own scientific theories, but what they do...
No, yeah, that you don't back up with anything called evidence. So, again, your scientific theories are stupid. You believe that microbes feel, they sense, you're in a bad mood, I'm going to go this way. I'm thirsty. He thinks trees are thirsty. Is there any evidence to indicate they could possibly be thirsty? Is there any evidence to indicate that anything but consciousness needs billions and billions of neurons to manifest? No evidence. But he believes this horse shit. And so he's sitting here pointing his finger at other people, calling them deniers and whack jobs, when he's clearly the one off the rational rails of reasonable belief.
Is they explain the science we've seen. They don't deny the science we've seen, like science is a big fucking conspiracy. I don't like it.
So again, there's no evidence that I said science is a big fucking conspiracy. What I said is it's evidence of dumbass. Okay, they make a mistake and they don't fix it. Like the Benjamin Franklin thing, all the rest of this stuff. They just keep piling on, trying to make the old stuff work when it doesn't work. And just like you in political solutions, you have no imagination and no capacity to think, in any kind of pragmatic, practical way.
Got my own system. No, it's like, to me, I'm using science and the facts of science to go beyond what it says now and try to deduce myself.
So again, he's talking about how he's crazy in terms of he's just telling us overtly, why take the little grains of unproven crap that conventional physics says, and I go even further down the wacky wormholes. And he's going to sit there and say, I make incredible arguments about truth. What's the truth? What's the evidence? And where does it point? Because if they do that, okay, you'll figure out that it doesn't point decisively in any of the directions he believes.
Things like, what is the phenomena of life? Yeah, it's probably a computational network of water molecules.
So again, so that just sounds like Ken Wheeler made up hyperboloid bullshit. Again, where's the cause and effect? Where's the diagram of the model of how this could possibly work?
Inside a cell, which drive a protein like it was a marionette. Okay, that's beyond current science, but it's based on current science. The facts. I'm not denying the fact.
No, it isn't based on any facts, because you have to account for all the momentums and all the movements, and you have to explain why they exist and what causes them. You can't just say that Ben geodesic did it.
It's like they're like the people at the USGS are, trying to hide volcanic explosions in order to cover up for the fact that they're controlling the weather with HAARP and that kind of shit, like Gary does or Heitler.
All right, so where did I do any of that? So again, just a preposterous example. No evidence. He's mad at Hathaway because Hathaway agreed that he can't find a shred of evidence that they ever did any detector experiments. There's just no evidence. Okay, there's just none. No evidence that the detector experiment they often excite as proving something, that the pattern goes back to normal. They never did the experiment. They never proved that the single slits in the double slit experiment somehow miraculously are no longer slits and somehow just create a lump of light when the detector's on. They never demonstrate any of it. They thought about it and said, that's what I think happens. Then that's how bad the science is that he's defending. And defending it being Nazi-esque. He's not defending it being like be a fair cop and have to defend itself. He's defending the fact that it should be like the Pope, and you just can't even look funny at it. You have to be, you have to give it this due respect thing, as if it earned it, and it hasn't, clearly.
He does. Oh, is that a slur? No, that's what you guys are doing. You're like.
So that's a lie. So just keep lying. Another lying liberal.
Like, for your version of theories to be true, there has to be this big conspiracy.
So again, more nonsense about a conspiracy. No, you just have to have people who don't know what science is, can't do it right. Like even a Professor Lewin, right? Seems like a credible instructor of physics, seems to know his stuff, but clearly has an ingrained bias, okay, and clearly connected to anybody who's Dutch, by the way. And he wants to defend this idiotic notion that there's two different voltages in the same location. And he's so glued to it that he'll sit there and in an argument just show that he really doesn't care about the truth. He just cares about defending something that was always part of his life, like it was his relative or something. And he's going to pretend that, well, my relative, yeah, okay, he murdered somebody, but so what? It was circumstantial, and he's making excuses, not the same excuses he'd make for any other experiment. Just bullshit. That's all it requires. There's no conspiracy here, except you're a bunch of people who are really shitty scientists, who really just don't care about demonstrating in terms of proving anything before they say it. They're like you. They just talk out of their ass. They just tell us what they'd like to be true.
A bunch of fakers, not just people that were misled, not just people that their biases led them to believe in theories that aren't true and see.
Okay, so where does he prove that? I haven't said exactly that. Where does he show the evidence of me saying it's a conspiracy? They deliberately and willfully have told lies. Blah blah blah. Where have I done that? Oh, that's right. That didn't happen. What I've said is that Leonard Susskind never did the two-slit experiment. He hasn't spent more than 5 minutes of his entire physics life actually doing experiments. And so he has no idea what the real results are, how light really functions. He's never taken a piece of dirty glass and shined light through it, a laser light, and seen the fact that, it makes that interferometer pattern. Just a piece of dirty glass. Interesting.
Apophenia patterns that aren't really there, but they're projecting in, like their science is a description of the faces in the clouds rather than the clouds themselves.
So he hasn't gotten cited a single thing I've said, hasn't quoted anything I've said, taken a portion from any of my videos, and there's a lot of my videos you could take a portion of where I'm saying something that's wrong. Okay, it's a fact that's wrong. Getting from there to here, okay, is a process, and through that process I've learned a lot. And so he could do that even, but he won't even do that little bit. He won't even do that little bit to find something where I actually said something wrong. He's just going to talk about things that I never said, about what other people have said, and say I've said them. I mean, you can't get more despicable than this. I mean, he's clearly a pedophile, right? Looks just like one, right?
No, not like that.
I mean, you don't need evidence, right? You just make it up.
They would have to be lying, like having never done experiments they claim to have done.
Yes, well, that happened. It's a fact. Okay, they cite experiments that haven't been done, and then they cite things like the Gerlach experiment with the electron. They claim that they're, when they shoot silver atoms through the experiment, they're claiming they're measuring some kind of electron effect. That it's all electrons somehow, that these aren't dipole atoms that they're shooting through the experiment, that somehow it's a monopole electron or something. And they'll tell us that electrons have spin because of this experiment. What are they talking about? Isn't that, you're telling me that's reasonable science? Giving the electron a frequency based on its momentum. You think it's reasonable for me to say that if I see a car going down the street 30 miles an hour, it's okay, it's perfectly fine for me to say it has a frequency, even though we know the car doesn't have a frequency. There's no frequency between the car and itself. There's no frequency, but that's okay. That's not at all making a mess out of words.
Things like that, and that's fucking nuts. Okay,
so again, he describes something that never took place and says it's fucking nuts. Yeah, okay, granted, yes. If that happened, that would be bad. But that didn't happen, liar.
My interest in those kinds of theories is my tolerance and enjoyment of them. For example, in the dissident science. Dissident science he does say that about scientists, but he doesn't really have to. His theories are more compatible than he thinks, but he does have this sort of...
Oh, right. His small Earth theory is so compatible with everything everybody thinks. Yeah, sure it is. Dinosaurs couldn't exist in the current environment. Bullshit again, right? I mean, obviously they couldn't exist in the cold. But just more urban legend bullshit he cites. Oh, it's proven dinosaurs couldn't exist in gravity. Yeah, no, not proven anywhere. They're built like fucking tanks. They're built exactly like you would build something that had a gravity problem, just like an elephant.
And so, in a sense, he's in this category as well. But he's kind of in his own category, the dissident scientist.
He makes outrageous claims, okay? Claims like this swirly crap somehow creates attraction and repulsion when the effect is so minor, okay, that if you made it account for magnetism, then you'd have to say the force was like as powerful as all the movement in the universe inside of a magnet to create the tiny bit of attraction or repulsion created. The cause and effect don't tie together at all.
But like Gary, he has to trash him, Theoria, Hyphelid
Right. I trashed them with what? Rational arguments countering their lies, right? They say something completely stupid or they say something completely misleading, and I point it out. Again, there's no quotes of anything I said about the dissident science guy or about Ken Wheeler. He's not quoting a single thing I said that was outrageous. Right? No examples. So like a great scientist, he's providing no examples to prove what he says.
to a lesser degree since he hasn't been talking about it a lot. Now, what you want to say is pay more attention to the data. Here's the thing.
The data. Yeah, the data you don't have. That's the whole point. Where's your data? Where's your data demonstrating that you measured the electron's spin? While the electron was attached to a fucking atom. Yeah, right. Sure you did.
You are not an expert in something, right? And you doubt the experts.
Right. Then you watch them. And that's what I've done. I've watched hundreds of hours of physics lectures. I've watched the experiments being performed where I can. I've watched a lot of videos from the 60s and all of that stuff. I've been through whole series of videos. I've educated myself more on the subject. I already had an education in physics in the sense that I've always been an engineering type.
As far as I'm concerned, you have two choices. Like, let's say...
So again, he'll talk about science denial, and he'll do it in the same way the real lousy kind of style of my cigarette broke. Yeah, my cigarette broke. All right, I'll have to fix my cigarette. I'll be back in a minute. Oh, it's still running. It's still broken. Okay. Yeah, it appears to be fixed. So again, there's just no evidence backing up a single thing he's saying. He's not having any kind of he's not making a debate in any way. He's not providing any evidence for his arguments. So just nothing. And let's see, 6 thumbs up, 1 thumbs down. All right, and he's not going to cite any evidence demonstrating where I've done something wrong in any way, that I've made any horrible errors in my statements.
There's mechanics in your town, and they say that they call your car's engine an internal combustion engine, and they say there's explosions going on thousands of times a minute, and it causes all these pistons to be swinging.
So again, he's giving examples of things that never were part of any conversation I had, nothing I've ever said, and just saying I said them, essentially. You can't provide a real example. Isn't it already evidence that the person's lost the argument when they can't provide a real example of the crime?
Around just right, like, that sounds a bit complicated. I just turn on and drive. So you're doubting the experts in your town. You have two choices. One...
So doubting an expert means that, so when somebody comes up with some new theory and then they say something like, oh, this is what Einstein thought. So Einstein has a definition of a gravitational wave. They change that definition entirely, create a mechanism where you're converting mass into the bent geodesic somehow, into some special new kind of force, okay, that no one ever knew existed in the universe until now, the special force. Okay, it's not a pull force like gravity. It's not a well. It somehow can barf, also. It's a well or a mountain somehow. A real radical change. And then they say these are the same things as Einstein's gravitational waves, when there's nothing. They're not even close to the same thing. And on top of that, Einstein said specific things about what was possible. And they just kind of pretend that somehow he thought it was something that could be done, when he overtly said, no, you can't detect them. Even if the thing was right next to you, you're out of luck. It's such a weak amount of change. The difference in the gravity, of something when you move it a tiny bit at light years distances can't possibly be detected.
I'm more of an expert. or two, get over it and rely on the experts.
So again, this whole idea, again, I'm just pointing out that the credibility of the science, you keep saying that the experts are the science. No, the science has evolved from Newton, and we see the progression of the ideas. Now, for example, they'll cite the Young experiment. I would argue the Young experiment was completely unremarkable. Okay, as an experiment, it showed no detail that Newton hadn't already discovered in Newton's rings. It's exactly the same thing as Newton's rings, just in a different form. You know, a little horizontal clip. And Newton had actually done the single hair experiment and the single slit experiment. So he'd already done the substance of this experiment. And Young didn't even glean out of his experiment the fact that there's two patterns. So his experiment was so crude that it didn't even provide that piece of information. You know, the part where the parts of the pattern are separating. And the more slits you add, the more they start to separate. The clumps, the other clumps in the pattern that you don't account for, that have nothing to do with waves. And again, I've already stated all this stuff, right? I've pleaded for an explanation for if the multi-slit, it actually projects images of what goes into it, a diffraction gradient. How do you explain images being projected with a randomized wave interference? How does your theory explain images in those locations? Exact images.
Right? If you're willing to learn how cars work and, you know, test it by fixing it yourself, it's one option. Or you can just face that you're going to have to let the experts handle it. Why? Because
And if the expert is doing something wacky, so if there's a guy under your car saying, I need some bent geodesic, I got to pour that in here, or, you know, you shouldn't have any skepticism. So you see him go to your car engine with a rubber duck, okay, and some other, you know, a spoon. And you say, well, what are you going to do on my engine with a rubber duck and a spoon? Come on. You shouldn't ask the question. You shouldn't expect an answer. How do rubber ducks and spoons have anything to do with this? Why don't you explain it to me?
You are an ignorant person about that particular subject, and you don't want to not.
All right, well, prove it. Just prove it. Show the clips of me being ignorant. Show them. Play the clips of me being ignorant, please. Or quote them. Quote this text where I'm being ignorant.
Be ignorant, so just leave it to them. And it's your choice, but...
Yes, it's my choice to doubt people who can't provide evidence. And physics can't provide evidence for their conclusions. They just cite, you know, conveniently quote mine the evidence. Again, they don't cite that, hey, there's images in the triple slit. Hey, there's two patterns in the double slit. Hey, there's absolutely no rational reason why a wave splits in two, a photon, when it goes through a single slit. There's absolutely no rational cause and effect explanation for why it just happens that it turns into two waves, so we can conveniently create interference. It certainly doesn't do that in water. So that example doesn't work. But I'm just saying they quote mine the evidence. Don't point out what they're saying has clear contradictions in the evidence. There's clear contradictions in the evidence. There's clear contradictions that a car going down the street 40 miles an hour is not a wavelength, is not a frequency.
Don't have option number 3 where you don't learn, but you still say. For example.
So, for example, will the example have anything to do with anything I've cited or explained in any of my videos ever? No. I'm predicting.
My cousin, my best friend in my life.
Okay, so now he's bringing up his cousin.
Who I love. Came up with this idea of, you know, he wasn't too sure about the ocean level rising, and he said, we had a science thing where we measured the water level with a bunch of ice.
So he's going to critique somebody else speculating when Pyrrho thinks trees get thirsty.
And the ice melted, the water level stayed the same. So he wasn't too sure about ocean level rising. He made clear that he accepted that the Earth was warming, but not necessarily the ocean level rise. And one reason is because if the glaciers melt, well, there's still a bunch of lakes and rivers that hold some of the water. And it's like, dude, the scientists have taken that into account. When they say how much the ocean would rise if all the glaciers melted, it would be a couple hundred feet. And nobody says currently that that's going to happen, all the glaciers. They do that math. They do the math of how much is going to be held. I mean, just obvious ideas like that. You've got thousands.
Well, the point is that the stuff where there's no land, okay, the water that's frozen, that's in the water, that doesn't matter. That can't change anything. It's the water that's on land that melts is the problem. Duh.
Thousands of scientists, even if one would miss it, it's just some sort of Asperger-y guy who's obviously a genius, but he's also tunnel visions and misses something. Yeah, but there's thousands of these guys. They don't miss something like some of the water will be held in lakes when the glacier, there'll be a lake underneath the glacier. Yeah, there'll be a...
The point is that all these subjects require a little bit of caution, okay? That you have to be a little bit careful. You can't do this seems like, looks like crap, and that's what they've done. The simplest pattern in the universe, again, on, off, on, off. They've said every time we see this pattern, we're going to suspect that it's wave interference, when clearly on, off, on, off, on, off is the simplest pattern. It can be created by lots of things. And so that's the kind of care and caution you have to have, and they don't have any of that. You people don't have any care for being careful about your conclusions. You jump to them, you leap to them, you aggressively run to them, and you really aren't too interested in what you're running on or what you're stepping on or what you're stepping over. And that's the flaw in the science, is that there's none of this Newtonian obligation to be careful. And Newton was careful for a reason, because there was a bunch of other scientists who didn't buy it, who didn't believe it, who were skeptical. It was a whole atmosphere that wasn't one cabal, all taught the same physics, all taught you have to be, it's the most proven theory in history, you can't, just do the math. They haven't been preached to by these icons that say, quit thinking and just do your math. We're done having a conversation about elemental function. We've decided what the truth is, and you will believe it, or you will not flourish.
Lake. They do that. That's part of the calculations. It's part of the plus and minus.
You'll be like this. You'll be slandered. Okay, so you go dissident, and you'll be mistreated. Clearly, you'll be abused by liars.
And just thinking you could pull it out of your intuition, it's like these guys, like my cousin knows how to...
That's all you've done, is pull it out of your intuition. Oh, the paramecium looks like it's upset and worried and concerned and having stress. So that means it is. Even though all those things look like just a little bit of chaotic behavior that you can understand through cause and effect. And again, even when you show him the evidence, even when you explain to him, they've already done these experiments, idiot, and they found out the paramecium only has 3 different moves. Left, 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 right, 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 or right, right, left, left. It has patterns, okay? There's only 3 of them. There's only 3 choices for its behavior. 3 choices. It's not doing any thinking. It's a frickin' reflex, retard. Clearly, by the evidence. But it looks like it's all upset and it's having a hard time figuring out the right answer. It's not figuring anything.
Work on cars. He used to help me work on cars and stuff. He wouldn't think that I could just pull shit out of my ass and say, "Oh, Chevy works like this. Do this with the the distributor cap."
So it's not pulled out of my ass. Asking a simple question like, well, do individual different photons interfere with each other? Like in the radar experiment, you claim they're interfering, so and they're different photons. Or do single photons create wave functions that interfere with themselves? So what's the story? The 2 stories aren't very similar. So why don't you explain which one's really happening? And if you're going to claim both are happening, well, then you have to explain why radar is special and flashlights don't work.
But that'll fix it. And he knows I know nothing. I'm even saying, I don't really follow this, because that's another thing. They'll be like, I don't really follow the politics, but this is my gut feeling. I don't really follow the science, but this is my gut feeling.
So they're all the same. So the Green Party is the same as the Communist Party, is the same as this party, is the same as that. They're all the same.
But the funny thing is, with him, when we argue, he gets frustrated because I'll show him fact, because I know how he really thinks. And so it's like, oh no, well, you're
So he's talking about his nephew or whatever the hell it is, his cousin or some other bullshit.
missing this fact. If you knew this fact, because of who you are, it would change your mind. But it's not that way in general, right? There's plenty of people when they know the facts. Like some people are saying, look, they're having these baby prisons. Yeah, no, that's all like propaganda. Right, but once they realized it was really going on, they're like, that's a little bit concerning. You know, some people, though, fully informed, knowing that that's going on, like Stephen Miller, who's making...
All right, so there's just absolutely no, references to anything real or connected to anything real here as any kind of science denial. So he's not demonstrated any of that.
Go on, it's like, yeah, it's a good thing. Because why? Well, because it creates a deterrent. Those kids are coming with adults, mostly walking them up here thousands of miles for a better life. If we make sure their life is shitty and they're separated when they're up here, well, they'd rather not be separated and take their chances down in Rape Gangville, Honduras, than come up here. It's a deterrent. I'm sorry, tough love, man. It's called objectivism, being objective. Don't let your feels make you...
Right. And this is some sort of rational conversation about something. Again, science to politics to bullshit. Nothing coherent here in terms of demonstrating a case. I mean, if this is a lawyer trying to prove a case, this is pretty pitiful, right? It's just a bunch of rambly the glove doesn't fit, you have to acquit. This is a bunch of bullshit.
Be too of a pushover. And they honestly believe that. My cousin does not feel that way, but if he doesn't know about the information, fine. Then there's also, though, confirmation bias where people look into this, like in the flat earth, the fault, erad.
Right, so why don't you talk about crop circles? I mean, things that we already know are willful gaming of society. I mean, just a willful effort to bullshit. And he's putting those in the same category as the ones who obviously sincerely believe what they're saying, something like the Dullard guy or something. Ken Wheeler, I have to put in another category just because I know he's taken the ferrocells apart, the supercells. He knows everything about them. And so he knows that under a microscope you can see the little filings lining up. I mean, there's absolutely, this has nothing to do with bending light or any of that horse shit. He knows it.
As I like to call it, is a good example of that. When I was a kid, that was around, but it was semi of a joke, semi of people that don't care what the truth is and feels good. Now, obviously, there definitely some faithful people because of how it feels, and people can look into that. Like they always believed in the globe Earth, but then they got a spark. What? And they look into it, but they're looking into it from the idea of oh my God.
So he's debunking something here, right? What's he debunking and how's he doing it? How's he demonstrating that we have credibility, they don't? Is there anything but him saying it? Is he demonstrating it with anything called evidence? No.
But it is flat. And they get this strong confirmation bias. And even though they're going and consuming, like Gary's an example of this. So he's gone and...
So he's put me in the category of the flat earthers who are obviously willful liars. They just want to believe it. They want to play the game. It's just, you have to be so ignorant to believe in a flat earth. So again, and so he's made these accusations, and I'm somehow not supposed to be personally offended by them, by this pedophile. This fucking pedophile thinks he can just spew out these accusations and I'm supposed to just accept them. This fucking pedophile.
Consumed a lot of high quality talks by Susskind and on and on and on. You might even seen Seth Lloyd stuff.
Yeah, I've played the videos. I've played them saying things and then demonstrated that what they just said, there's no evidence for that. Or here's the counter argument I'm making. So again, they're public videos. They're not hidden somewhere. Cite them. Show where I did something wrong, where I misunderstood them, where I perverted what they said, where I changed what they said in some way. Show me the clip where I've committed these crimes against reasonableness.
On quantum information theory. But he looks at it...
So again, quantum information theory. I haven't played any quantum information theory videos because they have no substance in them. Yes, everything that happens in a sense could be called, you could be informed by it because it's different. It's something that could have been this or it could have been that, and it was this instead of that. It has something about it, like the existence of an electron. It's different than the black space around it, and I can identify the difference. You want to call that information, it's, in my opinion, silly. That's all. It's just silly. Everything is moving somewhere every moment, and every movement is consequential, realistically. Every little butterfly wing flap does change the world in a way. It's just a fact. And you could be informed about every single movement in the universe, but there's no realistic prospect that's going to happen, so this idea of information theory doesn't mean anything, because the way we're going to model it is to model it over time. We're going to say, what does it do in the end? Knowing every detail about a single dice roll isn't very practical. What you need to know is generally what happens. And that's a different kind of information. That's the kind of information generated as a byproduct of that function. If that thing didn't happen, our brains wouldn't notice it, and our brains wouldn't have conversations about it. But there's no such thing as information theory. There's a physical, mechanical, cause and effect universe. You don't call it information. You call it a mechanical system.
Through confirmation bias. So he actually gets a tremendous amount of primary, or almost primary, secondary information, and tertiary, certainly, mostly quaternary and pentitiary information through videos.
Clearly, they're lectures. And, I frankly, and most of the ones that as I clearly pointed out, when they're actually doing experiments is with the interesting part, because then you can see how they aggrandize, what happened in the experiment.
But in the case of watching Susskind has done the experiment, so that's either secondary or tertiary information. That's pretty close.
All right, so you never proved that Susskind ever did an experiment in his life, but anyway, go ahead.
To the numbers and the data. And, but because of confirmation bias, he sees what he wants to see. And so you end up having...
All right, I'll just cite again. My critiques are public. They're right there. You can cite where I asked an unreasonable question or I made an unreasonable criticism. Go ahead, cite it.
When you get the data, you either end up with a well-informed disagreement. So Stephen Miller and I, let's just say we're both well-informed on the concentration camp policy. And he's honestly for it. And he knows that more kids are dying, like 1,000% more.
Yeah, bazillion% more in the fact that you allow fucking pigs to lay eggs anywhere is more of a threat to kids than anything we could do. And then certainly I could make the comparison to nature. So yeah, give them to nature, your little wonderful circle of life, where yes, the whole point is to kill 99.99% of the newborn, because the whole point is to create the one little master race. Asshole. You don't even understand the Nazi-esque nature of nature, you idiot.
Are dying per year, and that they're going to be traumatized and have PTSD, a certain percentage. He knows that, but he thinks that's part of, the deterrent. It's like there's some people...
Yeah, you have to pay for deterrence. That's just a fact, in the sense that you have to impose a negative SWAT. You have to whip now and then to get what you want. But you can't do it all with positive reinforcement because it's too expensive. Carrots cost money. The whip doesn't cost anything once you have it in your hand. And it's that kind of thing. And there is a certain practical economy. If you have to pay too much to get your donkey to move, then your donkey isn't productive anymore. These are just practical things, idiot. But again, this isn't on the subject, is it? No. This isn't about science denial.
That might think there really isn't, a lot of man-on-man rape in prison. But most people in America know that that's happening, but think, oh, but that's a reasonable deterrent.
Yes, and why does it happen? It's because the guards are corrupt, quite obviously, right? How does drugs get into a prison? Well, obviously the guards are in on it. So it seems like something easy to fix. So why don't they fucking fix it?
What about, no cruel and unusual punishment, in the tradition of the United States Constitution and stuff? Well, it's a good deterrent. So we just disagree, even though we're both fully informed. Though people might sometimes don't always think through the things they're fully informed about because of the confirmation bias. But anyway, you do have well-informed disagreement about things, even fascist policies, because some people are just pro-fascist policies. Then you have uninformed disagreement, like people who...
So again, there's just nothing specific here. There's no real evidence provided. This is just some lawyer who likes listening to himself just talking shit. I'm going to make up an argument, okay? It's all going to be straw. And that's all this is straw.
Who hate on immigrants because they don't know they're not that dangerous. Who hate on immigrants because they don't know the bankers have stolen, the bankers and businessmen have stolen trillions more dollars than we've ever wasted, giving welfare to immigrants or
so that makes two wrongs make a right. This is so right. So he hasn't even figured out the stuff that you should know as a little tiny kid. The two wrongs don't make a right thing. I mean, that's not that complicated. So you don't use some other guy's crime as an example of why this crime doesn't matter.
Or having to arrest immigrants or whatever. And then you have the propaganda form, right? The propaganda form of your...
Right, and that's the entire physics is full of this propaganda. They claim it's the most proven theory in the history of mankind, and yet there's no proofs. There's nothing. Doesn't exist as a proof. Again, I can cite where the proof they cite, the double slit experiment is nail in the coffin evidence. Well, the multi-slit experiment is kind of nail in the coffin example. I mean, I've just explained what polarization is in terms of the changing the actual phase of the individual photons, because the photons aren't just one little wave. Does Pyrrho believe that that's a photon, that all I have to do is do this much and I've created a photon? Or does he understand they have to have a ray length? And that, there's no wave theory that would explain waves being out of place. There's no wave theory that would explain how you could possibly create a wave that had the idea of polarization built into its physical structure, in terms of the wave being displaced. So it kind of abolishes wave theory as a viable explanation, in a sense, if I can prove my theory, that polarization is actually a displacement of the ray polarity, the ray being less than a straight line. There's no wave theory that can do that. So it would sort of prove that it is all horseshit, and we're really just talking about clumps of energy.
Where ideas are formed by stories you've been told because you're not paying that close of attention. So,
right, and Pyrrho is the king of trivia. So he has a trivial understanding of all of these scientific concepts. He read a stupid article in whatever science trivia magazine, because that's all it is. It's just headlines. Okay, he's read headlines. He knows nothing of detail. He has no idea. He cannot draw you a picture of how the interferometer works. He won't do it with a single photon.
Instead of watch the Lewandowski hearing, or let's say you did watch it and it's like, I don't know what they were talking about. And then you just listen to whether it's your friends or whether it's Fox News or CNN or MSNBC or None of the Times and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. So you're blah, 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 being all over this conversation. In a sense, what does this have to do with you proving somebody's denying science somewhere? And especially me. Oh, that's right. You're not proving anything. You're just making an accusation that you're not going to back up with any facts.
Whatever it is, you hear someone go, Lewandowski looked like a fool, which is what I would say. Oh, no, Lewandowski made the Democrats look like a fool. And you just take that idea. You're just like, man, people say, everybody knows.
Right, and so his example is ironic in the sense that that's what conventional physics does. They tell us we have to believe in gravitational waves, okay? Somehow there's this theory that matter is converted into bent geodesic, and we're all to accept that there was some formal debate about that somewhere, that somebody criticized it and they went through the permutations and figured out, does that make any sense? Can we make that real? How exactly, what's the cause and effect that would allow you to convert matter, destroy the matter essentially to create some vibration in a geodesic? How exactly do you do any of that stuff rationally? There was any conversation about any of that? Do you have any demonstration where there was any debate with these people about that being the new Einstein theory that Einstein never theorized? I mean, they put words in Einstein's mouth. They put a whole theory in his, I cited it as Einstein invented this when Einstein didn't invent any of it. So, you're the ones talking complete shit.
And that's the propaganda form, the just what you were told form. All right, so I figured I'd go through 5 conspiracy theories to prove my point that
All right, some of this I just couldn't care less about. I mean, again, so he's saying I have a conspiracy theory that I haven't done any of this stuff. So this fucking lousy pedophile, obviously a pedophile, had 2 kids and then he adopted one. So that's clearly a pedophile behavior. Why would you do that except to molest them? And he did. They all came out wacky, which means they must have been fucked up by him in his behavior. So yeah, I've proven my case, haven't I? Yeah, I think that's all the evidence I need, right? And if you disagree with me, you're a science denier.
These kinds of theories are real or known or become real or known. Things like, what was that called? The Tuskegee experiments, where they experimented on African American people and and some are going to die, or
the lampshades. We go back all the way to the whole Holocaust. Why don't you have the guts to go through the Holocaust evidence? Show me the science, the truth in that whole fucking pile of mess. Go ahead, you tell us, you point out to us who's being the extremist kook, the lying scum, and who's telling the truth. Yeah, right.
There was this time, I know they released germs, the military or something, I don't remember the details, you can look it up because this will be enough to Google, in a Daly City, and they just released these germs to see how many people showed up at the clinics, as a germ warfare study. They didn't think anybody would die. But, you release some flu or something like this, sometimes old people die from that shit. And so these true things that we've discovered versus things half discovered, we never found out, is it really true? Did the CIA import crack cocaine into L.A. on purpose as part of this or that? Was it a rogue? Okay, so what's always bothered me about conspiracy theorists is their lack of interest in discovered real conspiracies from the past.
Yeah, why should they give a shit about the old ones that are buried? And they have new ones to play with. Yeah.
And I'm going to go through some, but all of which that had a conspiracy theory status at least, because sometimes you don't hear about the conspiracy, you don't hear about the crime, let's say, until it gets discovered, and then it's like, oh, but sometimes.
All right, so whatever, this is useless, so we're not going to do it. This isn't evident. This is just evidence how there's things that are unwell evidenced. There's just no evidence, so people are allowed to make up stories like the Kennedy assassination. There's a lot of the evidence was buried and that's just a fact, and there's chunks of it missing and all that kind of crap, so people can make up what was in those documents or make up what was in those photographs or make up some other kind of crap, but who cares? I'm just saying, if you want to believe that kind of crap, that's your choice. There's still a lot of good evidence that yes, Oswald was the only character involved. Oswald was a nut his entire life. That it certainly fits a pattern. He's nothing but a Hinckley. It fits perfectly. But anyway, I don't want to. Why go through conspiracy theories to demonstrate it? Because as soon as you do, somebody's going to have one of those theories and be all upset. Oh, you can't diss our conspiracy theory. Yeah, you can. It's all arguments about stuff that just can't fucking matter. It's just bullshit. And anybody who logical knows that any conspiracy theory that involves more than 10 people, there's no way the secret's going to be held. There's no way one of those people wasn't a little bit smart and say, gee, I could use this knowledge to my advantage. This could be very useful to me. I could go to the Inquirer, I could do this, I could do lots of things and be, somebody. So it's just bullshit to think you can keep secrets. If you think secrets are good, easy to keep, you're delusional. So anyway, this is a waste of time, right? This isn't, conspiracy theories has nothing to do with science denial. It has to do with people like the religious kooks who want to believe and they don't care about facts. So anyway, I guess I'll leave it there. It'd be kind of a lack of continuity to get to some kind of real video, which I figure I'll do this guy, just because he left a couple of shitty comments on my videos a few months ago, and this science is shit, so I might as well prove it. So I think I did quantum mechanics 1.1, so we'll do 1.2 because it has more crap in it also, and then we'll probably do the third one too. We'll see. Just how unevidenced the conventional theory is, just how weak the evidence is, and how big the conclusion drawn is, how the two don't have any proportion to each other, how confident they are in their conclusion when it's built out of scant and weak evidence, and such. Let's see if there's anything else interesting here. It's not refreshing. Oh, fuck. Yeah, I better not touch anything else. It froze. Yeah. Not good. So there is an issue with the browser. I do have a lot of tabs open, so probably partially my fault. And such. Close some tabs. Anyway, I can't get to this yet. Taskbar? Nope. Let's try the keyboard just to be safe.